we found the final log entry scrawled in frantic handwriting, dated 2 days after the crew vanished. It ended with, "There's knocking again," a cast iron relic perched on a jagged outcrop 10 miles off the coast of Maine. The 2 keepers stationed there, Brooks and Hallie, hadn't checked in for 5 days, and the radio contact was dead. It wasn't unheard of for weather to knock things out temporarily, but this long without backup systems or flares. Unacceptable. Inside it, everything was intact. Coffee mugs on the table, both beds made. A shortwave radio crackled with static, still powered. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no signs of life. But it's coming from inside the lantern room. We didn't let anyone in. The ocean was eerily calm, too calm, and the gulls that usually circled the tower were completely absent. As our boat pulled alongside the old dock, I noticed right away. The light was off. I was part of a 3-man Coast Guard team sent to investigate the sudden silence from Elbridge Point Lighthouse. We arrived just before sunset. Brooks and Hallie were supposed to keep it running, storm or not. We climbed the slick steps to the lighthouse base and found the heavy metal door shut but unlocked. The air grew colder the higher we went. The last few steps creaked, even under our weight, as if protesting our presence. Just stillness. And then, the logbook. It was open on the main desk in the watchroom. Dated 3 days prior, the last official entry was normal. Routine weather updates. Minor fog warning. Nothing out of the ordinary. But several pages later, on a separate sheet of yellowed paper, someone had scribbled an entry with a pencil. The handwriting was shaky, almost unreadable in places. We heard knocking last night, thought it was wind, but it was inside. Lantern room door was shaking. We didn't open it. We didn't let anyone in. The date was 2 days after Brooks and Hallie had gone silent. We exchanged glances. That door leading up to the lantern room at the very top had a heavy twist lock from the inside. You couldn't lock it from below. My partner, Jeff, shrugged it off. Maybe one of them lost it. Wrote this before walking off the job. The only entrance was the one we were standing at. We climbed the spiraling staircase to the upper level, boots echoing on iron. Then we reached the lantern room. The door was closed. Was inside a sealed room. Something about the silence pressing down on us, the unnatural cold, made every instinct in me scream to not open that door. Told him to check the outside of the lantern room for any signs of damage, broken glass, anything. A more comprehensive team would arrive in the morning. We left the lighthouse just as night fell. The beam never came on. He circled the tower, came back with nothing. Every window intact. No breaches. I twisted the handle. Locked. From the inside. Jeff looked at me, eyebrows raised. "That doesn't make sense. Try again," I said. He knocked on the door, and something knocked back. 3 hard, deliberate knocks mimicking his rhythm, exactly. We stood frozen. The lantern room was unlocked, empty, logbook gone. No trace of the last 2 keepers was ever found. "There's got to be someone in there," he whispered. But the only way to lock it was from inside, and there was no ladder down, no exit through the glass dome. Jeff looked through the narrow pane in the door. It's pitch black. The lights off. I radioed our 3rd man, Stevens, waiting below. It was jerky, hesitant, as if someone was walking in circles, carrying the beam by hand. Whoever was knocking, Jeff wanted to force the door. We stayed in that stairwell another 20 minutes. No more knocks. No voices, nothing. Eventually, Protocol 1. We radioed for further orders, and Central Command told us to secure the area and return to the mainland. We were a mile out when Stevens pointed back toward the tower. "Hey, look." The lantern room light was on. A cold, white beam swept across the ocean. But no one had gone back inside. No one could have unlocked that room. And here, the thing that haunted me since. The light wasn't moving the way it should, smooth and mechanical. We've reviewed our boats on board footage later, and in one frame just before the beam turned off for good, we caught a silhouette in the lantern room. Not Brooks, not Hallie, not anyone we recognized. The Coast Guard searched Elbridge Point Lighthouse top to bottom the next day, but sometimes, on stormy nights, boaters report seeing the light turn on again just for a few minutes, sweeping the sea with unnatural precision. And those who get too close, they say, they hear knocking from above. The first time I heard it, I was half asleep and hungover, but there was no mistaking the sound. Somebody at the bottom of the lighthouse was screaming for help, and it was my voice. I took the job for the solitude. After a messy divorce and a worse drinking problem, the idea of being alone for weeks at a time sounded like therapy. The job was simple. Maintain the automated systems at Greystone Light, a remote beacon off the coast of Newfoundland. The place had been unmanned for over a decade, but the Coast Guard still sent people out quarterly to make sure the beacon stayed functional. The crewman who ferried me over just nodded and said, "Be careful. This place has got long shadows." That's where I came in. I was dropped off by boat, carrying a duffel bag, a sat phone, and 2 weeks worth of food. No frills. Just a generator room at the base, storage midway, and a sleeping cot in the old keeper's quarters. At the time, I thought he meant bad footing. I would learn differently. The lighthouse itself was your classic cold steel, echoey, with 69 wrought iron steps curling up to the lantern room. The first 3 nights were uneventful. Cold wind, gulls, lots of rain, hammering the glass, the usual loneliness that creeps in around 3 a.m. I kept myself busy running system checks and reading paperbacks by flashlight. But on the 4th night I woke up to screaming. Not distant, not faint. It was coming from the base of the tower, maybe 20 feet below. The wind outside had stopped. No more rain. Just the distant crash of waves and the pounding of my pulse. It was a man's voice. Sleep paralysis, I muttered, though I didn't believe it. I shut the door behind me and climbed back up, the iron railing cold enough to sting my fingers. Help, please, let me out. Like I was screaming from a place of real pain. I froze in bed, heart hammering, trying to convince myself I was still dreaming. But the voice kept going, panicked, gasping. It wasn't like hearing a recording. It was raw, desperate. I grabbed my flashlight and crept down the spiral stairwell, every step groaning under my boots. When I reached the generator room, the screaming stopped. Everything was still, no one there. No equipment, malfunction, no radio playing tricks. I stood there for a full minute, my own breath fogging in front of me. Then I laughed it off. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced I was still in the dream. I even recorded myself one night, just to prove I wasn't losing it, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. And the next night it happened again. I even tried the emergency flare, but the launcher jammed. I was alone, surrounded by fog, and every single night I heard myself screaming to be let out. Same voice, same words. Help, let me out. Please, please. I'm still down here. This time it sounded closer, but when I went to bed, that's when the dreams started. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the tower, looking up instead of down, watching my own silhouette sprinting up the spiral staircase as something invisible chased me from below. By the 7th night, I stopped going downstairs. I tried to call the Coast Guard, but the sat phone kept giving me static, no signal. I sat in the lantern room, flashlight and crowbar in hand, watching the stairwell like something might come up from the darkness. Said he heard his own voice screaming below. Claimed he saw something watching him from the stairwell mirror. I started keeping a journal to ground myself, wrote down every sound, every detail. I don't know why the lighthouse repeats us, copies our voices like it's this recording every moment we're inside. That was the worst mistake I made. The crewman took one look at me and didn't say a word, because the next night, as I listened to the tape, I heard it again clear as day. A third voice, not mine, not the echo. It was whispering in the background, barely audible behind the cries for help. It said, "You were already let out." I dropped the recorder. Didn't even try to sleep that night, but nothing ever did. On the 10th day, the fog lifted. The boat came. I didn't tell anyone about what I heard. Not officially. I told them the systems worked fine, did my job, got paid. But a week later I got curious. I looked up the tower's history. There was one maintenance report from the early 2000s, barely legible, written by a tech named Barry Colson. It was flagged as unresolved psychological distress. In it, he described hearing cries for help in the tower. Barry died in a psychiatric hospital in 2004. I don't know what he saw or what I heard, but I'll tell you what keeps me up at night. On the last night, just before the boat arrived, I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down into the dark. And I swear to God, I heard a voice whisper up the spiral. It was my voice, but it wasn't screaming anymore. It was laughing. The last thing they ever found of him was the tape recorder washed up on the rocks. Still running, his voice, barely above a whisper, repeated the same thing over and over again. They said the sea wants one more. I was part of the resupply team for a chain of decommissioned lighthouses off the northern Washington coast. We mostly brought fuel, rations, and occasional maintenance equipment to guys who didn't mind isolation. The kind of men who didn't ask for much, just a paycheck and silence, just stories about radios going dead, flares not firing, people feeling watched. That kind of thing. But Caleb didn't care. He was quiet, late 20s, just out of the Navy. I remember because we were checking weather conditions and saw the visibility had dropped to nearly zero around Winthrop. Nothing unusual for the season. Said he liked fog and distance. His words, not mine. It was mid-October when we dropped a new guy, Caleb Dauterson, at the old Winthrop light. Emergency protocol, a manual activation. Winthrop had a reputation, not a haunted one. Nothing that dramatic. We unloaded the supply crate, gave him the sat phone, and left. It was supposed to be a 3-week solo stint standard for those remote runs. But he didn't last 5 days. Still tied up exactly how we'd left it. The fog had rolled in thick on the 3rd night, but then our station got a call. On the wall, scratched into the metal paneling with what looked like a screwdriver, were 6 words. It wasn't from the sat phone. It was a distress ping and automatic alert triggered from inside the lighthouse. No answer. It was cold, damp, and silent in that way. The ocean gets when it feels wrong, like the world is holding its breath. The tape was an old-style mini cassette recorded over dozens of times, so the quality was bad, but his voice was clear. We scrambled a team and left before dawn. By the time we reached Winthrop, the fog was still clinging to everything. The dock was empty. No sign of Caleb. The boat was gone. Not missing, just never used. We approached the lighthouse. The front door was open, just a crack, creaking gently on the windless air. Inside, the generator was still running. Lights on. Coffee cup half full. Everything else looked untouched. Not yelling, not screaming, just talking. Like a conversation. But only one voice, repeating something, except the bedroom. The cot was flipped, blankets shredded like someone had clawed at them. They said the sea wants one more. We searched the entire structure, top to bottom, lantern room, storage, the outer decks. No blood, no tracks, no Caleb, but we did find the recorder. It was wedged behind a tool chest in the main control room, still running. Then, just as the tape was about to run out, he whispered. He sounded panicked, breathing heavy. There was a long stretch of silence before he said, barely audible. No signs of a boat or anyone else arriving or leaving. No foul play. They ruled it as presumed lost at sea. It started on the second night. I heard someone outside, talking, then static. Another minute passed before he spoke again, quieter. I asked if someone was there. The voice stopped. Then it answered. It said my name. It said it had been waiting. There was a metallic clang, maybe the door slamming. Then his voice again, sharper this time. It's in the fog. I see something. It's moving against the light, casting no shadow. I thought I was alone. I thought I was more static. They said the sea wants one more. And that was it. The Coast Guard launched an official search. Helicopters, divers, dogs, nothing. Claimed it was too costly to maintain. Locals say they still hear strange sounds near the cliffs on foggy nights, like someone talking just out of sight. Not even a footprint beyond the lighthouse. But that doesn't explain what I heard that night. You see, a few days after the search, I went back. I had to know. Curiosity. Guilt. Something. I just needed to see it again. I stayed until sundown. The fog rolled in just like before. Thick, heavy, and then I heard it muffled far below. Avoidsconversational.com. It was saying a name, not Caleb's mine. I stood there on the lighthouse stairs, flashlight trembling in my hand, while something just beyond the fog line spoke to me like it already knew I was listening. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just backed down those stairs, step by step, until I reached the dock. I never looked back. They locked up Winthrop Light not long after, but no one goes near it anymore. And me, I quit that job 2 weeks later, because if I'm being honest, I still hear that whisper sometimes, usually late at night, usually when it's foggy, always saying the same thing. The sea wants one more.